Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin, daf Nun Aleph. It's the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started from the bottom of Nun Amud Bet with the words Hemses ubeit hakosot. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about two different parts of the stomach. Remember, there's four parts of the stomach. And we're going to see a braita about what creates, we're going to talk about a hole in the Hemses and the beit hakosot, and in what situation is it going to create a problem. So Tanu Rabbanan, there's a braita that says, if you find a needle inside the beit hakosot, what do we do in the thickness of the wall of the beit hakosot? If it's sticking out from one side, it's a problem. One side, it's not a problem. Treifa. If it's sticking out on both sides, it's a problem because then it made a hole and it perforated it right through. But even that, even if it goes through both sides, and we check the animal after it's dead, and we find this needle, it could be that the needle came after, right? It could be, imagine it like a thorn even. It could be like a thorn. So even if it comes out on both sides, we check. If there's some blood on there, then we know it happened before the shechita, and that would be a treifa because there was a hole. But if we don't find any blood on it, then we can assume it happened after shechita when there was no more blood in the animal, and in came this needle. Okay, so it perforated. What's the difference? It obviously wasn't, or we can assume it wasn't there before because there's no way that you perforated a hole and there wouldn't be blood there. Okay, we're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go on. Like maybe the blood got washed away, so we'll get back to that. And why is this not a criteria in other parts of the body or other kind of situations that they discussed? And we're going to see what the difference is here. But now we're in the middle of this braita, and the braita is going to go discussing a bit of another kind of situation where there was a needle inside an animal, but not for the purposes of treifa or not treifa, although it is affected by it. But this has ramifications in a sale. Okay, so for example, higlid piyamaka. So you sold me an animal, and then I slaughtered the animal, and when I open it up, I see that there was blood, and there was dried blood and scabbed up already. So now the assumption is you sold me the animal, just, the last few days, you sold it to me to slaughter. So if he glib piyamaka, now, I go in, I see there's this hole, and I see there's blood, and there's dried up blood. So now I say, hey, dried up blood, we assume if it's dried up and scabbed, it must have happened 3 days before at least. And then, if I bought the animal within the last 2 or 3 days, I can say, hey, this has been here for 3 days. You sold me an animal that was a treifa. I want my money back. But if it didn't scab up, which probably, it depends really who's paid the money and where the animal is, but probably it would be me who now is stuck until I can prove, right? If it hasn't scabbed, then I have no way to prove that it happened within the last, before the last 3 days. And then I would have to, if I can't prove it, well, I'm stuck with the animal that's now a treifa. Now here we go back to the question that I asked before. Now that the braita ended, they say, why is this different from all other holes that we've talked about? Because we paskin that they're treifas just because there's a hole in them. We don't say, oh, well, let's see if there's blood there or not. So they answer, there it has nothing to stick onto. The blood is on a part of the body and it just gets washed away with all the fluids going on in the body. But if it's on a needle, then it has somewhere for the blood to stick. And that's why we check, because the assumption is the blood would stay there if there was blood there. And if we don't see blood, it's a sign. So that's what they're going to say. Now, since there's this needle, if it was before shechita, then it would have stuck onto the needle, and therefore we can assume that if there's no blood, there really was no blood, and the needle came in after. Amalei Rav Safra la Abaye. We're now going to have an interesting story. So Rav Safra tells Abaye the following thing. Go look and find this Talmid Chacham, this student who came from Israel. Ve'amar, and the student told me, that's what Rav Safra is telling Abaye, Rav Avira Shmeini, my name is Rabbi Avira. He's quoting the person who said Rav Avira. Ve'amal, and Rav Avira told me, and this is why Rav Safra is sending Abaye, Ma'aseu ba'lefnei Rebbe. There was a case that came up before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Machat shenimtzeit ba'ovi beit hakosot mitzad echad utchafa There was a case that came before Rebbe with a needle that was only in one side of the beit hakosot, and he said it was a treifa. Now, until now, what did we learn? It's not a treifa. So basically, he's telling Abaye, go figure out what happened here and why Rebbe said this, and maybe we have the halacha all wrong. So Shalach le, Abaye sends to this Rav Avira to come meet him. Velo ata legabe, but he didn't come in front of Abaye. He ignored the message. Azal hu legabe, so Abaye goes to him. Havakaya igra, but the guy was in the attic, on the roof. Amar nechol marvenete, so Abaye said to him, come down and come talk to me. Lo nachit, he doesn't come down. Seliku legabe, so Abaye goes up to the roof and goes to meet the guy. Okay, this guy obviously doesn't really want to talk to Abaye. He's like, what are you bothering me about? Anyway, Abaye comes up to the roof. Amar le, ema li gufadu vadehechi hava. Abaye says to him, tell me exactly what the story was about this psak you were saying about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Amar le, Rav Avira starts telling him the background. Maftir knesiot ana li'ila mi Rebbe Rabba. I am the guy who collects, not exactly sure what the maftir knesiot is, but some people explain he's the guy who tells the students when it's time to go to yeshiva, when it's time to go in, when it's time to go out. Okay, I'm like a shamash there, like the shamus. So I'm this guy who works for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. V'hava Rav Huna tzipora av Rav Yossi mada'a. Okay, Rav Huna from Tzipori, Rav Yossi from Meads. They were there, and Yoshvin lefanav. They were sitting in front of him. Ubat lefnei Rebbe machat shenimtzeit b'ovi beit hakosot mitzad echad. And they bring this case before Rebbe, and it's a case where while they were sitting there, this case came before Rebbe with a needle in one side. In the beit hakosot, in that stomach. V'hafacha Rebbe, now Rebbe turned the animal inside out, the beit hakosot, the stomach part of it. Umatzala koretam utrafa, and he found some blood in there, and he said, this is a treifa. Amal v'amar, and Rebbe said, im ein shamaka koretam minayin, if there was no wound, meaning the needle was only in one side. But Rebbe did his homework and said, hey, there's blood in there. If there's blood, it must have gone through both sides. And because otherwise, where would the blood be coming from? And therefore, it must have been on both sides. Even though now it's only on one side, it must have at some point been a hole that went all the way through. Amar leh, so Abaye's response is, Tcha tarye lahu gavra? This is what they bothered me about, to go all the way to ask you these questions? What the situation was? This is an explicit Mishna, your case. This is not some unique psak of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. I don't know why they bothered me to come to you, to go up to the roof, right? What's the idea here, right? This is just an obvious, simple Mishna. It's a classic case here of a beit hakosot that had a hole in it. Happened to be, the machat was only on one side, but why'd you bother me for all this? Okay, now, I don't know if there's any connection, but there is a good literary connection here, that the story was all about, or at least part of the story had Abaye going up to the roof. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the next part of the Mishna, nafla min hagag. If the animal falls from the roof, right, we have to worry that maybe the internal organs were destroyed. So I'm a Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, hiniach be'ema lamala, uba u'metza'a lamata. If you leave an animal up in a high spot, and then you come and you find the animal down below, ein choshashim mishum risuk evarim. We don't worry that the animal fell down. Okay, the assumption here is that the animal could have walked down, scaled the wall, okay, and come down themselves just because you see them. Now, if nafla min hagag, you see a fall, then you have to be concerned that the inner organs got crushed. But if you saw it up on top and then you found it down below, you don't have to worry about that. Hahu gadya. There was a story of a gdi. Okay, we're going to have a lot of stories because these things happen all the time. There was a gdi, a kid, right, a baby goat. So he looks through, he's standing on the roof, okay, and he sees through the skylight. Okay, skylight was just a hole, like a chimney kind of, hole there, and he sees groats down at the bottom. Digal nafal mi igra la'ara. He jumps down and falls from the top down to the ground, right, because he's going after the food. Rav Ashi. This was brought in front of Rav Ashi, and they wanted to know, is the animal a treifa? Right? They obviously slaughtered the animal. Now they want to know, is it a treifa? Amar le, so he says to him, Hada amal, just one second. Hada amal Rav Huna, hiniach be'ema lamala ubal mitzah lamata, Now he quotes back what Rav Huna said. Huna said if you find it at the top and then you find it at the bottom, right? You left it at the top, you come back, it's at the bottom, you don't have to worry about it. But is that mishum di'it le'midi le'misrach? Is that because it can scale the wall? There's a wall there for it to climb down. V'hai leit le'midi le'misrach. But this has no place because it's a skylight. There's no wall around the skylight, right? It's just an opening, and basically the animal goes all the way down. It can't scale any wall. Oh, Dilma, mishum da'amda nafsha. Or do we say, no, it's because maybe the animal jumped from the roof before, in the case of Rav Huna. When I find the animal at the bottom, it could be the animal jumped. How does the animal jump? The animal assesses, can I do it, can I not? Jumps down, and when it jumps down, it lands on its 2 feet and nothing gets ruined. So you could say that's the reason. V'hainami amda nafsha. And then this would be the exact same situation, where the animal assessed and took a jump down, right? They were going for the groats. And we can assume that the animal landed on its feet and didn't get hurt by the jump. So Amrale, the answer given back to the Rav Ashi answers is Mishum da'amda nafsha. Okay, it's because the animal assessed. And therefore, we're not worried this animal has risuk evarim, because when an animal jumps on their own volition, as opposed to falling, we're not worried about damage to the internal organs. Right? So he says, the reason there is Mishum da'amda nafsha, and hainami, and this one also, amda nafsha. Hahi imarta, another case. There was an E-W-E. Dehava be Rav Chaviva, there was in the house of Rav Chaviva, Dehavu shadran kare batraita. The outer legs were turning, the back legs were turning outward. Amar Rav Yeimar, haishigrona nakte. This animal must have rheumatism. Now that's not something that's going to cause the legs to go out. That's not something that is a treifa. So he thought the animal was fine. Matkifla Ravina. Ravina comes and says, V'dilma chuta shidra ifsik. Another reason why the legs could be that way is because maybe the vertebrae at the spinal cord broke, and that's causing it. Badkua, so they check the animal. Veshkachua kiravina, right? Again, this is after the shechita. They check the animal, and it turns out it was from the spinal cord. So, afilu hachi, but the Gemara says, so obviously this animal's a treifa, because that's a problem. But afilu hachi hilchita ki Rav Yeimar, even though in the end, in this particular case, Ravina was right. In the end, in a case like this, in general, if this were to happen again, we paskin like Rav Yeimar, that because shigrona is shachiach, because rheumatism is very common in animals, whereas kuda shidra lo shachiach. It's very uncommon that the spinal cord would be out of place, would be broken. Amar Rav Huna. Now Rav Huna brings another case. Chalim haminagchim ze et ze. If you have two animals fighting with each other, so you can imagine you might break some internal organs. He says no. Ein chosheshu mishum risukei evarim. We are not worried about that. Apagav demidvu b'kaime. Now, even though they're in agony and in pain, simra ba'almahu denakelu. It's just like a heat inside, like a fever that's going through because of the fight, but it's not a treifa. However, enough la'ara. But if they're fighting and the animal falls to the ground and with a big thud, then chayshinan, then we should be concerned and we have to check. Amar Rav Menashye, hani dichle degan veganave, male rams. Okay, the zcharim, by the way, were male rams also. Male rams, degan veganve, that a robber stole, and threw, as they were stealing them, they threw them over the gate so that the animals could, they could get the animals out of the house. And chosheshim mishum risuk evarim, we're not worried that the bones that the internal organs broke. My taima, what's the reason? Ki shadilahu, amonayu shadilahu, because when they throw them in a particular way that they're going to fall on their feet, right? Like they're on their motznayim, like with their feet standing up. Ki hecha deliru tu kamayu, because they want them to run in front of them, right? They want them to run home with them. So they don't want them broken, right? Why would they bother stealing them? And if they want to get them out of there, they're going to need them to be in good shape. However, ahadrinu, if they're returning them to their owner, vaday cheshinan, if the thieves return the animals and just throw them back over the fence, for sure we're going to worry about that because they don't care about them breaking. They're sending them back. Now, the Gemara modifies this, qualifies it, and says, v'hani mile da'adrinu machmat yir'ah. That's only if they're returning them out of fear, meaning, like the police are coming, like, quick, throw back the animals. then we have to worry they're going to break. But if they feel bad that they stole them and they're repenting and they want to return them, well, then of course they're going to return them carefully, because what's the point of returning broken animals? And therefore, tshuva al yadu da'avde, he's obviously doing real tshuva, and therefore we can assume that they landed on their feet. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Now, what if somebody comes and hits an animal with a stick? So we're going to have all different kinds of scenarios. I want you to imagine the animal standing with its head toward me, its tail far away from me, and I hit it with a stick, basically on the spinal cord, right? Like down the vertebrae of the back. So imagine I'm taking it from the head to the tail, or the reverse, from the tail to the head. Those are the two cases we're going to discuss right now. I have a very long stick. Hikal roshav chalak lapez navav. I hit it on the head, and my stick ends by the tail, meaning the tail's farther away from me. Or az navav chalak lape rasha, or I hit it starting from the tail but ending at the head, meaning the head's far from me. Or keneged kol hashidra kula, or basically I have a long enough stick that when I smack it down, it smacks down right on the whole spinal cord or the vertebrae. Ein chosheshim mishum risuk evarim. We're not worried that a blow like that is actually going to cause the limbs to break, right? Something that's going to cause it to be a treifa. However, ishlim chutra, remember chutra from Chagadia, the chutra is the stick. If the stick is short and it finishes a palage de gaba, the stick is going to hit. The idea here is that wherever the stick ends, that's where the biggest blow is going to be. So if it's either by the head or by the tail, that's not going to make the animal a treifa. But if I have a short stick and it ends in the middle, a smack in the middle of the back of the backbone, when I smash it down, it will likely cause internal damage. Or if it has knots in it, where the knots are going to hit the back in all different places, and that will kind of, with its impact, will cause this risuk evarim. Or imachye apsakit cheshinan. Okay, what if instead of having the blow go from the length of the animal, I have it go off across the width of the animal, from side to side with the vertebrae in the middle. Now, if I hit a blow like that, that actually could break the backbone, could break ribs, okay, and could cause injuries that are going to make the animal a treifa. Amar Rav Nachman, beit harechem ein bo mishum risukei evarim. This is interesting. When an animal comes out of the womb, is born, we don't worry that there's risuk evarim. Okay, we're not worried that through the process of birth, it messed something up in the animal. Now, if we would be concerned, we'd have to kind of wait a certain period of time to see, like with falling off the roof, okay, if they fall off the roof, we have to either check inside or we have to wait a certain period of time to see if they're walking, if they're functioning properly. So same thing with a baby. But now we're saying, no, we're not worried about that with the baby, okay? A baby animal is born. We don't worry that on the way out, maybe it got some injury. So now we're going to try a few attempts to try to prove this from a Tanaitic source. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. So Rava says to Rav Nachman, Tanya de Mesealach. Here's a braita that supports what you said. Tinok ben yom echad. Okay, you have a tinok who's a 1-day-old child, right, baby. Mitame beziva. Okay, now we're talking about a child. Okay, but we're going to compare animal and child. Animal and childbirth is like baby and childbirth. Now, on the first day, if that child has a zav discharge, which is a certain type of discharge in males, then he has impurity like a zav. Now, we have to know is, now, if you think a child went through a traumatic experience coming out of the birth canal and is considered as potential, maybe they have risuk evarim, then you can say, ikrekan mibsaro velo machmaton. So, now, this would be a case where the zav, if someone's a zav because something happened that caused it, that is not actually called a zav. So, if that's the case, in this case, we're not going to end up, if we thought it was risuk evarim, they would be a zav because of the risuk evarim, and that wouldn't actually be tumat zav. Okay? So, because of that, we're going to say that it must be that we're not worried of risuk evarim, otherwise the child wouldn't be a zav. Because that's not the criteria of zav, where like if something happened and caused the discharge, that's not actually a halachic discharge that's going to cause you to be a zav. So, that would seem to prove that there's no problem of risuk evarim, which is exactly what Rav Huna said. However, they reject this, as they're going to reject all of them, by saying, maybe this was only in a C-section birth, but because there's no going through the birth canal that causes the risuk evarim, but if it happened in the regular birthing canal, the birth was in a normal manner, maybe it wouldn't be a zav on the first day. So if you say that source is only talking about a C-section baby where there was no trauma that would make the baby potential for risuk evarim, and that's the case where it's mitame beziva, that doesn't teach us anything about our topic, about Rav Huna. Tashma, second attempt, and we're going to have the same kind of answer here. Egel shenolad b'yom tov, shochatin oto b'yom tov. If you have a calf born on Yom Tov, you can slaughter it on that day. So, what's the issue here? Well, if there was a concern, if you have to wait a certain period of time to make sure the animal's functioning before you can slaughter it, then an animal would be what we call muktzah, or nolad, right? It's born on Yantif, and we weren't expecting it before Yantif to eat it, because we know if it's only going to be born on Yantif, we have to push off slaughtering it. So that would mean you can't eat it on Yantif. The fact that you can eat it means you can slaughter it right away, which means that we assumed, right, that there's no trauma going through the birth canal, that we have to wait to see, is this animal going to function? So they say, same thing, you could say this was an animal C-section, and only then are you allowed to slaughter the animal on Yom Tov. Third attempt to prove Rav Huna. Tashma v'shavin she'im nolad hu mimo imo, shezem amuchan. Okay, there's some disagreement about a bechor, but what they both agree about is a bechor with a mum. Now, bechor with a mum can be eaten, right? You normally have to sacrifice a bechor with a mum, but if the animal is born with the mum with it, right, you can't just slaughter a mum, a bechor. Even if if you're in chutz la'aretz and we don't bring, or there's no sacrifices anymore, you still can't eat your bechor until it has a blemish. But if an animal, a firstborn, is born as a bechor, everyone agrees that you can slaughter it on Yom Tov because it's minamuchan. Because we assumed, even the day before, even though it was a bechor, and we didn't expect it to have a mum, but since if it were to have a mum, you could slaughter it that day. So therefore, in other words, since potentially it could have been born as a bechor with a mum, so we assume that this was potential before, and it was already prepared that you could theoretically have slaughtered it. So everyone agrees about that point. Now, if you want to say, oh no, same thing, only if it came derech dofen, and then that's why, right, again, this was all proving there's no concern for risuk evarim, and that's why you can slaughter it on that day. But derech dofen mikadosh. But an animal is not a bechor if it's born through a C-section. So there would be no issue. It doesn't even need a mum. Okay, it's not a bechor if it's born by C-section. So the answer that we gave for the others, the rejection of this is not a proof, because you could say it's a C-section, you can't say here. How do we know this? V'hama Rabbi Yochanan modeh haya Rabbi Shimon li'inyan kodeshim she'eno kadosh. Right, Rabbi Shimon agrees that this is not sanctified at all. Right, a bechor that's born by C-section is not a bechor. So you can't give that answer. So how can you explain? It must have been a regular birth, and then it went through the birth canal, and then we're not worried about risuk evarim, and that would prove Rav Huna. But hachabamayaskinan shefris al gabe karka. So now they're going to say, oh no, the case is we're not worried about risuk evarim because it stood up on its feet already. And it's usually the animals don't stand up on their feet right away. This animal stood up on its feet right away, and therefore it's obvious that didn't have risuk evarim because it started walking. I actually remember I used to go to the zoo with my kids in Jerusalem when they were little, and once we saw a video of a giraffe being born, and it basically just stood up on its feet. It's very interesting. So it does happen. It looked to me like that was typical, so I don't know. This makes it sound like it's a bit atypical, but I don't know enough about it to know. Amar Rav Nachman. Beit hamit ein bo mishum risukei evarim. Now, in the slaughterhouse, people sometimes throw the animals down. Sounds a bit unpleasant, but we don't have to worry that the limbs were broken. Hahu Torah denafal. There was an ox that fell. Ve'ishtama kal nigichute, and you heard him screaming. Al Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta shakal mishufrei shufrei. In comes Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, and he eats from the best of the meat. He says, "This is not a problem. We don't have to worry about risuk evarim, even though the animal was screaming." Amrle Rabana, it fell and it was in pain. Amarle Rabbana Menalacha. So the rabbi said to him, where did you get this from? Amar Lahu. He said to them, Hachi Amarav Tziparav Noetz Ad Shmegia La'aretz. The animals have very good instincts, and they put their paws down right away, with their claws, right? They immediately put them down on the ground and protect themselves from falling. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Okay, now we're back to the falling from the roof. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Amda einat tzricha me'et le'et. If it fell, then you don't have to wait 24 hours to see. If it stood up after the fall, you don't have to wait the 24 hours to make sure that the animal's okay. Bidika vadai baya, but you do have to check the animal after you slaughter it to make sure that it's not a treifa. Halcha einat tzricha bidika. But if it walks, not just stood up after falling, but if it walks, then you don't even need to check inside. Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar, echad zo v'echad zo tzricha b'dika. Rav Chia bar Ashi says, both of these need b'dika, whether it stood or whether it walked, it still needs to be checked after you slaughter the animal. Right? Because again, the fall, even though it's walking, still something could be problematic inside. Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Acha Amar Rav, pashta yada la'amod, if it puts out its paw to stand up, af al pi shelo amda, even if it doesn't stand, or akra ragla lahalech, where it lifts up its leg to start walking, but af al pi shelo alcha, so even though if it puts out its paw to stand and it doesn't stand, or it puts out its paw to walk and it doesn't walk, that's enough to say you don't need to wait 24 hours. Rav Chisda Amar ninara la'amod af al pi shelo amda. Okay, Rav Chisda says if it even attempts to stand, even if it can't stand, that's enough. Okay, the Hilchata is in parentheses, I'm going to skip it. Amar Ameimar mishmei Rav Dimi min Nahardea. Now, Ameimar said, in the name of Rav Dimi from Nahardea, Nefula sha'amru tzricha b'tika keneged b'nei me'ayim. When they talk about it falling, what do you have to check? You have to check the innards, okay, the stomach. Amar le Marzutra, hachi amrina mishmei Rav Papa, but Marzutra says, wait, they say in the name of Rav Papa, tzricha b'tika keneged beit halal kulo. You need to check the whole inside, the ribs, the vertebrae, the spinal cord, all that has to be checked. Amar le Huna mar berei Rav Nechemya le Rav Ashi. So Huna, the son of Bar berei Ravina, Rav Huna mar bar berei Rav Nechemya. Okay, Huna Mar, I guess is his name. He's the son of Rav Nechemya. Said to Rav Ashi, Simanim mai. Do you have to check the simanim to see if they broke? Amar le, simanim kashim hem etzel nefila. He says, no, the simanim are made of a hard material that don't break in a fall. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, of shenechabat al pnei hamayim. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, if you have a bird that smacks into the water, gets smacked into the water, kevan sheshat melo komato dayo. If the bird swims the length of its height, then, right, the amount of distance, if it swims the amount of distance or floats the amount of distance that's as high as the bird is, that's enough. That shows you the bird is okay. That's like the parallel to walking. The bird on the water is like moving in the water. But it really depends, because we all know that things flow in the water automatically. It depends on the direction of the water and the direction the bird is going. That's only if he can walk down, right, from downstream to upstream. But upstream to downstream, the water's carrying it. Now, if the water's standing, then it's fine, then as long as the bird walks. Now, if it's going downstream, and the bird's going downstream, and there's twigs going downstream, and the bird goes quicker than the twigs, hakadme. Well, then the bird came first, and then it's obvious that the bird is moving in the direction, quicker, and it's not just the stream of the water. Okay, now we're going to have a whole list of things that we're only going to start today about if an animal falls onto something, okay, not just falls from the roof, but falls from the roof onto something. And the question is going to be, we're going to give a whole list of things and classify, are these considered hard, that the animal's going to have a big smack and basically hurt their, perhaps ruin their internal organs, or are we going to assume that it was soft and it had a soft landing and therefore it's okay? So, Galima Matiach Cheshinan. We're concerned if it's again, concern means, right, you have to check it. So we're concerned if it's a taut, like a cloak. So you take a cloak and you pull it really taut, and the animal falls into that, that's hard. But Lo Matiach, if it's loose, then Lo Cheshinan, if it's not taut. Uf umeupaf lo chashinan. If it was folded and then pulled taut, since it's already folded in a few pieces, it's already not going to be a hard impact. Isla umakarva kitre chashinan. If it falls on a net and there's a lot of knots in the net and the knots are close to each other, right? That's how nets, they're tied together, right? It's pieces of rope tied together. If there's a lot of the knots, then we assume when it hits the knots, it gets injured. Lo makarve kitre, but if they're very far from each other, the knots, then lo chashinan, then we're not concerned. Kitana da'ave betune chashinan. If you have flax that's in bundles, we're concerned because they're hard, they're big bundles. But if it falls on the side of those bundles and then we assume it kind of slides off them, then that's a soft landing. Asuriyata cheshinan, and if it's bundles of reeds, then we're concerned because again, once they're bundled up, they're hard. Kitana didayik enafitz lo cheshinan. If you have flax that was combed, one second, I have to get the translation of the words. Katish, one second. Diek, 1 minute, is, right, it's beaten. Right, the flax gets beaten and then combed. So if it's beaten, that's diek and nafitz, and it's combed, lo chashinan. Again, then it becomes soft. Daik velo nafitz, but if it's beaten but not combed, chashinan, then it's going to be hard still. The combing kind of softens it up. Da'avi bizre, if you made bundles of the flax, even if it was beaten and combed, which would make it soft, but once they're in bundles, it's harder, and then we're going to be concerned. And it's because it has knots in it, the bundles, that's what we're concerned about. It's going to be hard because of the knots. Dakta chashinan, if you have broken pieces, let me see again the translation. Dakte, right? This is cho, they call it in the Koran, a coarse bundle of unspun fiber. Then we have to worry about it. But dakte kata, but if it's very fine, then lo chashinan, because already it's much softer. Navra chashinan, if you have this is the fibers of the palm tree that are around the tree. That's hard, chashinan. Timachta lo chashinan. If we've already broken them into strips, then already they're soft and we're not concerned. Kitma nihala chashinan, lo nihala lo chashinan. If you have kitma, which is ashes, if the ashes are sifted, then they harden, and then you're going to worry. If the ashes are not sifted, then they're not hardened, they don't harden, and then we're not concerned. Again, this is all if the animal falls on any one of those items. We're going to continue this list tomorrow, but we're going to stop right now because that's the end of our daf. So what we had in today's daf was we started with the needle in the beit hakosot. It needs to be on both sides with blood, because even if it's on both sides, it could be it came in after the shechita. And then we talked about different ways. Also, if you bought an animal, how you would know if it's scabbed up. We know it's from a few days ago, and then you can claim, right, you sold it to me when it was a treifa, and I want my money back. Okay, and then we talked about the blood here, because the blood has something to stick to, and that's why blood is an indicator, where in other places it's not. And we have the whole story with Abaye and Rav Safra and this Rav Avira, where it sounded like the needle was only on one side, but then it turned out they found some blood, and that was why Rebbe was strict here. We talked about the falling from the roof then, and then we talked about the difference between falling and jumping, or scaling a wall. Okay, and then we talked about animals fighting with each other, or thieves, and in what case we're going to be concerned that it might break, which cases are we not concerned. We talked about how coming out of the womb is not a concern for risuk evarim. We tried to prove it, but we weren't very successful. Then we talked about in the slaughterhouse, we're not worried if the animal gets thrown around, and we talked about all these signs of if the animal did fall, what happens after and what do we do? And we saw different opinions, if it stands, if it walks, right? Do you still have to check, not have to check, and all the different options there. And we had what parts do have to be checked. And in case we have to check, we're not worried about the simanim, we are worried about internal, perhaps just the innards and like the stomach, also maybe the ribs and other parts. And then we talked about on the water, how do you test if the bird can walk if a bird falls in the water? And from there we ended with this long list of items that either harden or that are harder surfaces for the animal to fall that will hurt it, or softer surfaces that will not hurt it, and then we don't have to worry about this issue of risuk evarim and it being a treifa. with that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.